Good evening and welcome to the rest of the news. We have a tremendous program for you tonight. Our special guest is Ed Holloway, former state representative, and we want to discuss a little bit about the vote in England recently. I guess it was June 23rd, and where England pulled out of the European Union. So, Ed, tell us what you think about that.
Well, this was unexpected in terms of all of the people involved, and particularly in the British elite and the others. But the rank and file Britain, the members, the public, that have been forced from several different perspectives, one of which was the massive immigration that's taken place and other factors. And they surprised all of the pundits and others.
Yeah.
But the main thing has been all of the oppression that has come from the regulations coming out of Brussels, which is the headquarters of the European Union. They're telling people that you can only use certain teapots, you can only do certain things, you can't do this, you can't do that. And the frustration reached its pinnacle in that vote that was taken on Thursday. And then the reaction around the world at that point, it was been kind of chaotic. Nobody knows what's going to happen and what's going to be the outcome and the results of all this. And it's a situation that is compounded by a long period of time. And the European Union, it really is a outbreak of the end of World War II. And at the end of World War II, or very close to it, in July of 1944, there was a meeting in the United States at a place called Bretton Woods. And at Bretton Woods is a little ski resort in New Hampshire. And at that point, 750 delegates from various countries around in the free world got together at Bretton Woods, and then they met to decide the fate of the post-World War world. And there were bankers, economists, government ministers, the future leaders of Canada, France, Greece, and New Zealand, and several other countries were there. But the two things that the United States, who had become the superpower, was the United States could step in and provide what we call free trade and provide protection. And the protection was the Navy would protect all of the trade that was taking place, regardless of what country, from any of the threats that would traditionally been involved. So that became the base for what became NATO, and the United States would provide security, would provide the free trade, and all of those things, and that was the birthplace of where the European Union came into being. But the bottom line is that European history has been on hold ever since the end of World War II. America's restructuring of the world in the 40s and the others, and the century-old competition that existed between the countries in Europe and all that, were simply put a lid on with the security blanket that the United States had furnished. And they were happy to have that, and they were happy to have the thing. And it left their economy free to become involved in social programs, the elderly and other things, and free medical and all of those things. And the creation of the government of the EU, which is located in Brussels. And I happened to be in Brussels at one point on a seminar and had an opportunity to visit the headquarters of the European Union. And I never saw such a structure of bureaucrats and others that were all there from various countries and all of that. And it was the biggest party that would go on constantly and all of that. And they would sit there and come up with ideas and regulations that they would impose on everybody else. So all of those things have been festering under the surface and have taken its place right now in the vote that was taken in Britain. But at the same time, we're looking at a situation where Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, or others are, wait a minute, let's have our referendums.
Yeah, good.
So there will ultimately, I think, be a total collapse of that. Now, where does the United States fit in this? again, we're now, and always have been since the end of World War II, the only stable country, the only stable economy, the only one with manufacturing base and everything else that we have. So, fortunately, we will be a survivor in all of this, and ultimately the United States will be the last man standing. But at the same time, we're engaging in some of these same programs that brought the collapse into that. And it's a cancer that we have in our country, in our society, that will eventually cause us to have a major problem. But not in the foreseeable future, but it's inevitable.
Well, when I heard about this vote, I immediately went on the internet to see, why it happened and what it meant to us and everything. And I was totally shocked by what I found, because there was nothing on the major news websites or news about why this was happening. In other words, they say, oh, well, this is the end of the world, and we're not going to be able to travel, and we're not going to have jobs. And it just went on, but nothing about why this has happened. And I suddenly realized that America is a place and a time where the news media is totally controlled by the left-wing element.
And the left wing at that time did not think that would ever happen. So they were caught completely off guard.
Unbelievable.
And this is why there was no information. This wasn't supposed to happen. So how did we cover it? And this place, though, is going to cause a major problem throughout the world. And in Europe, there are a lot of the countries over there are terrified about the reawakening of Germany, and Russia is desperate to firm up their boundaries and all of that are there. And in Turkey, Turkey's got a real attitude, and they have elected a new government there, and they're wanting to carve up their area of their sphere of influence with a breakup of the NATO and the EU. And all of that gives that going back to the original situation where they were in charge of a large area of North Africa and all that, and the Ottoman Empire. So they have visions of grandeur in that regard. I found that studying history, going back, things that sometimes the unintended consequences take a long time to materialize. The problem we have with the Middle East has always gone back to the end of World War I. During World War I, we had promised the Arabs everything in the world, that they would have their own country, their own caliphate, and all of these things. The British promised them everything. That's why they were able to get through Lawrence of Arabia. They came in and told them all these wonderful things were going to happen if you could help us defeat the Turks. And they did. And then when the war was over, they were double-crossed completely. And in that process, they have been angry ever since. The British and the French sat down and destroyed all of the Arab countries. They'd set and drew the lands that they had because they were interested primarily in the oil that Mesopotamia and the Middle East was providing. They had come off of the thing where we had coal-fired engines in all their ships, and they needed oil. So this was their opportunity to take advantage of that chaos that was a result of the war to go divide up the spoils. And that was in 1919 at the Paris Peace Conference. We had a President, Woodrow Wilson, who was there, who let this all happen without any comment at all. All he wanted was the League of Nations. And when that was part of it, and it left them free to divide up these countries. And it even carried over to 1922 when the French decided we didn't get everything we wanted. They said, well, let's see, we'll take it, carve out a part of Syria and call it Lebanon and make Beirut the Paris of the Middle East. So all of these things have been festering throughout the Arab world ever since all the promises and everything that was made, and then they were denied. And now they want to build their caliphate and go back to the original. Saudi Arabia was the only one that really came out of that without any real problem, because they were given the House of Saud was given an area of, of the desert that had nothing in it. So it was no big deal with the British or the French, so you could have all that. It wasn't until the 30s that a couple of American geologists went over and said, wait a minute, I think you've got oil under this country. And in the process, they discovered all of the oil, and it became the lifeblood of the Arab world in Saudi Arabia. All of these things come together and feed all the things that are existing today. And people, because of our lack of education and the lack of knowledge of history, we don't know how did this happen? Why did it happen? And the unintended consequences of all these previous decisions are now coming to the fruit that we're looking at, and we'll have to reap this harvest, and it's not going to be a pretty picture.
Well, I think of the European Union as, a move to create a one world government.
That was the original intent, was the thing, we talked about it in Bretton Woods, was that you had Keynesian was a delegate, Harry Dexter White from the White House under Roosevelt was there, and all that. It's an opportunity to have a one world. The free trade was the basis of starting that, and all that. We could all live together in this wonderful utopia.
Utopia, yeah.
And this utopian concept has been around forever. Complicated thing that people, wouldn't it be wonderful if we all did this and we all did this? And it's like Lake We Want to Be Gone, the story that they came up with, where everybody is, and all the children are happy and all these wonderful things. So in that process, though, this thing is now starting to unscramble, and it's going back to more like it was prior to World War II, when you had centuries of conflict between the various countries in Europe and all of that. I don't think there will have war in the traditional sense, but there's going to be things that'll be. Terrorism is going to play a major role in this thing. A lot of people will capitulate and say, I'd rather live under an Islamic rule than I would be, in the chaos and otherwise. And all of those things happen to the Balkan states. When you look at some of the countries down there that are Muslim, but they were European, that goes back to the Crusades, to the pre-Crusades, when the Muslims under Muhammad were expanding all the way into Europe. They had all of France. I mean, they were close to France. They'd taken Spain. They were all the way up to Budapest in Hungary, and all of that. And that was when Pope Urban II decided that, wait a minute, this has to stop. They're taking every bit of a Christian basis of the Europe, and then destroying them and making them all become Muslim. So that became the basis of the crusade, was to push them back to North Africa, and in the process recapture the Holy Land and have access to Jerusalem and all the other religious bases of Christianity.
Well, I think that, we've seen lots of times where the Muslim immigration has really attacked England and Europe and say, well, we're going to have Muslim rape gangs to go out and rape all these children and everything. And, and to blow things up, blow up the airport, blow up people in Paris, blow up everything. And, I think that had something to do with the fact that the people in England said, hey, we've had enough of this blowing everything up.
Terrorism attacks, but they have had so many influence of the other. Another thing was that they're right across the channel in Calais, France, were thousands of refugees from the Muslim world that were wanting to come into England. And this was one of the reasons that they voted the way they did, was to stop that, to protect England. Because right now you have 100 cities and have no go zones.
Absolutely.
And it's controlled by the Muslims and under Sharia law. And the military and the law enforcement cannot even go into those communities of Muslims. Got the same thing in France.
Yes.
And this is where the people, the rank and file, are finding themselves completely against the wall, and they said, we've got to stop it. So the government is not helping and not stopping it, so we've got to do it ourselves.
Well, now, this whole idea of freedom versus the elitists and the bureaucrats trying to control everything is in this video, and you've seen it.
Right.
And it's called PIE, Politics as Easy as Pie. And Bob McEwen is a former congressman, and he made this DVD. And it's about American history and how America our Constitution, our government was based on the Bible, and how these same elitists that are working in the United European Union are same type of elitists are trying to push Christianity out of America. And it seems to me that this Brexit vote, where England pushed out of the European Union, is a model for America to also say, hey, we're not going to go down the same road of socialism and big government and loss of freedom and poverty and all that goes with socialism and big government. We're going to push back. And, I'd like to offer this to anyone that calls our number right now, 893-2444. Call that number right now, and we'll send you. It's totally free. And you told me you thought it was one of the best.
It really is.
And I certainly agree with that. This is something that every young person ought to have. It's based on the Bible and how our Bible was in the Constitution. Where did our freedoms come from? And where does wealth come from? All of that is in this DVD and what we can all do about it. So give us a call right now, for this is called, Bob McEwen and Easy as Pie. Politics is easy as pie. So give us a call right now, 893-2444, and we'll get this out to you free right away.
Right. Well, I think it's very important that people look at that, because he broke it down into very simple terms that anybody can understand. And the fact that our founding fathers were history buffs. They had studied everything that happened around the world. They found that democracy in its truest form was mob rule. We didn't want democracy. We want a republic. We wanted the power to the people and one nation under God.
Yes.
And all of those factors played into why this country was formed and why it was so successful for such a long period of time, until all this stuff started breaking down. And in that process, he goes into it and says it very simply, and we can turn this thing around and come back to that. But the three things that are tearing the country and Europe apart was the fact that economics, and the fact that the regulations and the litigation. Everything is sue this or sue that, and all of those things are extremely destructive to the total structure of the economy and everything else. So when you put all the regulations on top of everybody, that you can't do this, you can't do that, and this is why we've lost so many jobs to foreign countries that don't have those regulations. And it's imperative that the entrepreneur be allowed to create, and create jobs and create the entrepreneurial spirit that provides something that the people want, and it's without the restrictions of government.
Now, you remember, this is in that video, too, that we're talking about right here. It says governments go through several stages. They start off like America did, under bondage to England, and then they get a spirit of truth, great courage, liberty, abundance, and then they start downhill because of selfishness, complacency, apathy, and then back into dependence. And it seems to me that America has crossed over and is
on the downward.
The big shots are trying to push us down here and take away freedom, make us more dependent. And really, it's up to you and me to push back against all that, like England has, and so that we can get back to being our liberty and freedom again.
And the ironic part of that is that it's happened time after time. There are 29 great civilizations who were never defeated from the outside, but from internal collapse.
Right.
The power brokers and others that want the control and the dominance have brought them to their knees and back to the they're buried in the history.
Yeah, under bondage again.
Right.
And see, they're trying to say, oh, we don't need God anymore. Take prayer out of the public schools. Take the Ten Commandments out. Take the Bible. Take creation science and just forget about God. We're so smart. We don't need God anymore. So they're pushing God out, which is pushing us down into selfishness, complacency, apathy, and dependence. And now, just like England, it's time for America to push back and say, hey, we're not going to let the socialists and the left-wingers take over our country and push God out of our lives. We're going to push back. And that's why you need this video to show it to everybody. It's totally free. And it's got a phone number there. You call that number, we'll send you another one and another one and another one. But this is very important for the survival of our country. And that number to call right now is 893-2444. Call it right now. And if there's no one there, you can leave a message on the answering machine and we'll get it right out to you.
It'd be a great tool for every one of the civic organizations and educational groups, and particularly Sunday school classes and all of that to show, because it's a part you mentioned earlier about the media that doesn't tell anything about anything.
Nothing. We're being brainwashed all the time.
And right now, our military is under a tremendous threat. An Air Force general was sitting with a Bible on his desk, and he was told to have it removed, that it might upset somebody and offend them. And the military is saying you can't have one nation under God as part of your
Absolutely.
And when you tell a priest or a rabbi or a minister that he cannot take a Bible into the hospital of a VA hospital
that's right.
to one of the patients, is the most ridiculous thing, but it's not being communicated to the public.
Yes, that's exactly right. Well, that's why we have this program, to let you know that God is being pushed out, and we're being pushed down to dependency with big government, big taxes, big regulations, and they want to take over, just like the European Union. And it's time for us to push back. Get this video today. Call right this minute, 893-2444. This is a must.
Right. Type of things that are happening around the world. The number of Christians in the Middle East that are being slaughtered. They're beheaded. The villages that have been there for over 1,000 years are being destroyed. The churches and others. And this country and others will not allow a single Christian that's under a threat to immigrate to this country or anyplace else.
That's ridiculous. Here all these Muslim terrorists are being brought in, but no Christians, who are the ones that need it the most.
We've had over 1,100,000 Muslims that have come in during the Obama administration, and there's thousands more that they're waiting between now and the end of his term to bring in. And it's something that is reaching its critical point in this country when you've got cities in Minnesota and areas that are, again, you can't go into those neighborhoods. And the thing you mentioned about the teenagers and rapes, And all of that.
Unbelievable.
The thing is that under Sharia law, that's acceptable. Women have no rights whatsoever. They're slaves.
It's terrible.
They're slaves, and this is another thing, and gays and others that are executed automatically without any question. They're pushed off of buildings, they're beheaded.
Well, yeah, look at Orlando. The Muslim went down there and shot all those homosexuals.
And all of those things are going on, and one of the reasons that there have been so much more of this is that that's their opportunity to terrorize the people, to get their foot in the door, and eventually take complete control and live under a one-world Islamic state.
Yeah, and to me, that's sort of what's going on in the European Union. And the people of England said, hey, you know what? You're not going to brainwash us anymore. We're going to pull out of this thing. So they did, and that's what we need to do. We need to pull out of the huge bureaucracy that's in Washington, D.C. right now and vote for people that will turn it around and oppose this huge bureaucracy that's taking place in Washington.
The critical thing is this November.
Yeah.
Every member of the House of Representatives in Congress will be up for re-election.
Yeah.
Every member, or one-third of the Senate, is up for election, and the President of the United States. And the outcome of this election will determine the future of this country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ed, we're running out of time, and appreciate you all watching, and tune in again next week for the rest of the news.
سورة وأنا لك بخاز شو سورة جو العراق قتل خله.
من دي بش كبيرة ديخ سورة بدكم لين كفار.
دخلوني وشدوا إيدي ورجلي وخلوا لايك بلاستر على حلقي. تعذيب طبعا. أنا بالذات كان يقول لي قولي الشهادة، يعني قولي أشهد لا إله إلا الله طلعت. أنا طبعا كنت ما أقبل ما أقول.
لو الشيطان نزل بكل جنوده ما كانش عمل في الكنيسة اللي عملوه الإخوان المسلمين.
We're called to care about things that God cares about, and He cares about this, and so we need to care about this. So I think we should all be doing something, somehow all be involved and know what's going on. They're a family. It's like your brother and sister. And I love you.